All right, everyone, thank you so much for being here. Let's get started. We're so excited for this conversation and thank you all for joining us. I am Stacy Wang and I'm the CEO here at the San Francisco Education Fund. For those who might not be familiar with us, we are one of the longest standing education nonprofits here in San Francisco, and we've been for a very long time focused on ensuring that all students have an opportunity to learn and unleash their potential. Our mission has always been about providing equitable access to learning for students by mobilizing our community, all of the amazing people here and then some, to engage in our schools by providing time through volunteering, funding, and resources, so we can ensure resources go directly to our schools, teachers, students, and families. Among many other exciting projects that we're doing right now, we're excited today to be talking with all of you in partnership with the SF Parent Coalition and SFUSD to just talk about what's been happening with literacy in San Francisco. What are we seeing with the data of how kids are doing? How are we addressing unfinished learning? And what are the plans moving forward? One piece I wanted to share with all of you is that the Advent's been partnering with SF Parent Coalition and the school district and others to bring high dosage tutoring to about 4,000 SFUSD students. So our students are getting tutoring 3 times a week by credentialed teachers. So that's been a huge piece that we're seeing kids grow kind of twice the amount of normal learning. And we've been serving about 4,000 students. So that's one piece of the many things that are happening in partnership with SFUSD that we will talk through today. So let me pass this over to Yvette at SF Parent Coalition to introduce herself, our co-partner here today, and a little bit more about the context that we had in the fall that leads up to today's conversation.
Wonderful, thank you, Stacy. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yvette Edwards. I am one of the co-founders of San Francisco Parent Coalition. I am also a mother here in SFUSD of a 3rd grader and a 5th grader. San Francisco Parent Coalition is an organization that works to center the needs of children and youth in San Francisco public schools by bringing together a diverse network of parents and caregivers to advocate for a thriving, equitable school system. So we are going to be very excited to welcome back today to this discussion Deputy Superintendent Ford-Morthel and Chief Academic Officer Dr. Priestley for part 2 of a conversation that we actually began with them back in November. Those conversations and that topic was absolutely related to what we are going to be discussing here today, and it's literacy, right? Mostly it was related to the plans and the outcomes within SFUSD as we were looking at some interesting data, as Stacy just mentioned as well. At that time, the district acknowledged that one of the goals set for this year would be focusing on ensuring that every student was receiving quality instruction and equitable support to be able to reach their full potential. So for those of you who were not able to attend last November, seems like a long time ago, I'm just going to provide a brief overview that talks a little bit about what we learned during that discussion so that you're ready to hear a bit more today. There was a lot, but I will be brief. If you are interested in learning more about that discussion, you are absolutely welcome to go back and relook at the entire thing and the recording as well. So some of the topics that were discussed during that first session involve the trends that we all know, that we have all seen related to learning loss, specifically with assessment needs that weren't met for many of our youngest readers, not only here in SFUSD, but frankly, nationally. There was a lot of discussion related to how truly important it is to ensure grade level competency is reached for these students. There was a study that the district shared with us from the Annie E. Casey Foundation, acknowledging that students who were not proficient readers by the end of 3rd grade were 3 or 4 times more likely to drop out of high school than proficient readers. That roughly 88% of students who did not receive a high school diploma were struggling readers in 3rd grade. So we knew then, and we know today, that there was some work that needed to be done in many ways. So we're excited to learn what has happened since that conversation. Another piece of the conversation discussed the significant impact and learning challenges that specifically our focal groups, in particular our Black and Brown students, Pacific Islander students, Native American, Latinx, SPED families, and English language learners had experienced. Some of the data at that time showed that 7,000 students hadn't really had spring assessments in spring of 2021. 12,000 students were having learning struggles predicted to be below the growth and also experienced the lowest participation numbers. I know many of those in attendance today are hoping to hear more about what the district is able to share related to any progress or any structures that have been put in place to improve those outcomes. Stacy sort of spoke on one of these earlier related to the tutoring program. So I believe that it's going to be very important just to make sure that we learn and hear more about those efforts. We also learned about a lot of plans that were being put in place structurally within the district, actually at the sites where the real work happens. So some of those things that were discussed were 3 main shifts that the district had laid out: acceleration, not remediation, deeper learning in language and literacy, and a balanced assessment system in place to make sure students were actually getting what they needed consistently during the lessons and from these plans. Finally, we heard about a planned audit that has now began since that time. This audit was meant to monitor this work and to inform. It's being done by the new teacher project, Tntp, and it's essentially in place to make sure that the existing resources that we have right now are having the right impacts. I know a lot of people in attendance today are hoping to hear anything that can be shared about the audit. It is underway, so it's not yet complete. We'll be talking about that as well. So please feel free to just stay tuned for more information related to that beyond what you hear today. One of the things that was noted in that November discussion that really struck with me was SFUSD is not there yet. So we have to just remain a little bit patient. This was something that was said by Deputy Superintendent Ford-Morthel. We as families definitely appreciate that the road may be long to get there. So I just want to thank both of them for returning to this discussion and sharing anything they can about where we are now versus where we were then in terms of seeing improvements surrounding the literacy efforts here in SFUSD. Okay, so I think what we're doing is still waiting on Dr. Priestley and Deputy Superintendent Ford-Morthel. Let's hold on one more minute and hopefully we'll be able to get started.
Yeah, while we're waiting for Dr. Priestley and Deputy Superintendent to join, we do have Devin from the school district on the line here, who is part of the academic team. Devin, do you want to take a minute to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Devin Krugman, and I work in curriculum and instruction. My primary role is supervision and support of our content coaching and teacher pipeline teams. So that includes our teams in content and coaching that run things like our Pathway to Teaching program and induction, as well as our core content teams. So ELA, history, social studies, math, science, computer science, and our multilingual programs. We are really excited to join today once we all get into the Zoom and share a little bit about the programs that were named earlier, particularly our audit process, our deeper learning work related to instructional coherence, and then some exciting additions of how that's grown into some curriculum piloting, particularly at the middle school level. So that is a quick introduction from me.
The other quick thing, I see there's a couple of questions coming in to chat. So there was one about the tutoring, what's been happening there. So just a little bit more about that before we get launched is that we've been talking with the school district for a long time about the high-dose tutoring piece and piloted with 1,000 families last summer. And we had a process to identify the schools with the highest levels of students with unfinished learning and literacy in elementary, and are partnering with about 20 schools, as well as a group of families, 100% of who qualify for free and reduced price lunch, and are also with students who are at least 1+ years behind in academic in literacy, and are working with about 4,000 students this school year for that. There'll be more opportunities around summer tutoring, as well as an expanded launch and continuation for next fall. So if folks are interested, please feel free to reach out to anybody at the Ed Fund, me or my team, to learn more about that. And we'll put our information in the chat.
Okay, so if, and it looks like, I think perhaps maybe as we wait for Dr. Priestley to be able to log in, I can go ahead and get started and then pass it off.
Sounds great.
Works great. So I wanted to go back for a moment to one of the pieces of the introduction that came up earlier, which is that we know very much as a district, and particularly as a curriculum and instruction division, that we have a gap between where we hope to be in terms of our student outcomes and teacher practices and where we know we currently are. And so the initiatives that we're going to share some updates on today are meant to highlight and provide concrete action to help us close that gap between where we hope to be for our students and for our families and where we know we are. The first piece of that is the auditing of our curriculum. And there's Dr. Priestley.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon.
Hello, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Stacy. I can't see anyone, just you. And I'm assuming there's a group here, as I see there are 39 participants. So first, let me say my apologies. I spent the last 15 minutes trying to log on, maybe 20. So I don't know what went wrong. I just could not get in. So my apologies, but I am here and we are ready. Are we in the midst?
All right. Yes, Dr. Priestley, please go ahead. So please do a quick introduction of yourself and feel free to share the content you wanted to present about where we are with literacy at this point of the year.
Right. So my name is Nicole Priestly, and I am the Chief Academic Officer in SFUSD. So I'm excited to be here to just give you a brief update on some of the work that is happening. I know we have provided some previous information, but I think we have a few new things that we can add to the menu to share and to actually give you an update on some other things that were already in progress that I think we've spoken to before. Who is not here is our Deputy Superintendent, Enikia Ford-Morthel. She is in a meeting with the superintendent and she is held up right at the moment, but I hope she'll be joining us shortly, likely around 12:30. So I just want to go ahead and introduce her so when she comes, she can jump in if we're still in this conversation. And of course, she'll be glad to take questions and speak to anything at that time. Devin, I don't know exactly what you shared. Did you share the middle school pilot or the TNTP update?
I didn't. I did a quick introduction, just naming some of the why that's guiding our priorities, and then was about to start with the audit, but didn't get there.
All right, so I'll pick up with TNTP audit. And Devin, I'm sure who's introduced herself, Devin Krugman, is a supervisor. And that's not true. She's a director in curriculum and instruction, and she works very closely with our content teams. So let's jump right in. I don't want to waste anyone's time. I see the chat and I know we want to get moving. So let's start with TNTP because I know people are familiar with that. We have completed the curriculum audit with TNTP, which means they reviewed several grade levels of at the elementary level. And they then went on to doing a walkthrough of 15 of our elementary schools. They are anonymous schools, but a good representation across our district where they looked at teaching and learning. And so they spent time in classrooms, they talked to teachers, they talked with site leaders, they looked at student work samples, interacted in some of the classrooms just a bit. And so they are working on assembling a report for us on that portion of the audit. We have already scheduled for them to give a report on May 9th at the curriculum committee. Those meetings are now in person. You can view them as webinars, but they are meetings where you can come in person now, and they are held at 555 Franklin Street in the auditorium on the main floor, on the first floor, and that begins at 4 p.m. again on May 9th. And the TNTP team that many of you are familiar with will be giving a presentation of their findings. And so that is super exciting for us. And that will be the first sharing that there will have been directly from TNTP on the findings. It is not the complete analysis of all that work. We will follow up with that in the fall, but we did not want to end the school year without giving some feedback to our community on their findings and the work we'll be doing in relationship to that. So just wanted to say that we are continuing to work with TNTP and collaborating with them on our next steps and we have already begun to engage in looking at how we can begin a pilot in our elementary grades, preferably in the early grades, so that we can begin to identify new materials, particularly around our foundational skills curriculum that we can bring forward. So that is the beginning of probably what will be a multi-year pilot. We won't likely start until the spring. We're trying to work on that. And that's actually moving really fast because that requires a lot of coordination, looking at materials. But we want to make sure we have time for focus groups, which means we would like to engage members of the community in the process as we engage with materials, get their feedback. We are looking at a process and how we can include the community. We know we would have a lot of interest, so we want a wide representation in those focus groups. So we're going to try to come up with a process in which we can have folks, likely apply to participate, and then have some external body, assemble groups that gives a wide representation, and also who can put in some time around being part of those focus groups. So we're underway with that. That's exciting for us, and I encourage you to tune in to that May 9th meeting so that you can hear the updates directly from TNTP around the findings there. Am I missing anything around that particular piece, Devin, before I move on? Does that sound pretty comprehensive?
Yep.
Right. So Devin, why don't you share just a little bit, because that's for our elementary pilot and that's strictly going to be an ELA. If you could just talk a little bit. We are also going to move forward with a pilot in middle school. We recognize we've gotten a lot of feedback that our middle schools need some attention and need some and may need some additional support. Although we did not do an audit of the literacy curriculum, we felt like it would be able to streamline a pilot in our middle schools, as we were planning also to begin some work in our elementary schools. So Devin, if you could just talk a few minutes about that.
Yep, happy to share. So as Dr. Priestley spoke to, we received a lot of feedback, particularly over the last 2 years, from our middle school teachers, coaches, and administrators around the sufficiency of our ELA curriculum. Historically, the core curriculum has been built with the design being a high level of teacher-led development of units and lesson plans. And so I think particularly in thinking about the language and literacy needs of our students, site-based staff have asked us to provide curriculum with a greater degree of detail and depth. So more daily plans, unit plans, instructional resources that are student-facing and teacher-facing, and provide a high degree of support around the scaffolds that I spoke to earlier around meeting the difference between where students are and how we can get them to grade level. And so in partnership with our middle school assistant superintendent and team, we have worked to try to identify a core curriculum that we might be able to pilot that would both meet our language and literacy needs and our priorities around deeper learning, something that emphasizes student collaboration in the academic discourse we know is necessary for English language development, something that's centered in inquiry and guiding questions, and something that provides a high degree of scaffolding for students at various places in order to access grade level materials. So after a review of available programs and trying to figure out how to adjust them to meet the needs of our district priorities, we have landed on starting in the next school year, so 22-23, piloting a curriculum that is from EL Education. EL Education is a national nonprofit curriculum provider. Previously known as Expeditionary Learning. They began as a partnership between Outward Bound and the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And they have ELA curriculum. Folks might be familiar as it's been most recently adopted by Oakland. But the curriculum not only focuses on students having access to appropriately complex texts and tasks, but also ensures and provides a high degree of scaffolds for all of our different focal populations of students. And so in order to meet the needs requested by site staff and families, we are running a pilot of the curriculum next year with a group of our middle school ELA teachers. And the focus of that pilot is to implement the curriculum and to collect feedback from families, from students, from teachers on outcomes, on usability, in order to make a determination on the degree to which we might continue, expand, or change our piloting of core curriculum for middle school ELA. So that's sort of a quick overview of what our middle school plans are.
Devin, I'm going to put Devin on the spot to talk about one more thing because she's been leading this. We have, in previous conversations, you have heard us talk about coherence and alignment. And as a district, we know that we have work to do in creating just some baseline experiences for our students across all schools. And one of the ways we hope to do that, we have been working to revamp, or not even revamp, to create newly, we're starting from scratch, create newly instructional guides for teachers, and particularly new teachers. And so this is a really big endeavor because we hope to create guides K through 12. And we have spent the last few months working on a draft kindergarten instructional guides. And we have had many focus groups from that. I know internally working with teachers, veteran teachers, working with new teachers, different staff. And we have pretty much got to the end of drafting because we hope to bring it to schools over the summer and ready for implementation in the fall. Only kindergarten. So we really tried to dedicate the year to kindergarten so we would have something we could replicate from the bottom up. So if you have a kindergartner or if you have a kindergartner, they might be the beneficiary of this in the fall. So Devin, if you just want to talk a minute about what's in those instructional guides, and again, in an effort to move towards coherence and alignment, and how that might show up for some students if anyone has an upcoming kindergartner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So the design of the guides, as Dr. Priestley spoke to, is to try to provide concise, coherent guidance for particularly the viewpoint of our new, but all kindergarten teachers and eventually K-12 on what to teach, how to teach it, and when to teach it. We know that particularly in kindergarten with our foundational skills, teachers are making a ton of choices around how time is spent. And we want to make sure that we provide them with guidance so that those choices ensure that students leave kindergarten on grade level. So the guide begins by providing a developmental overview of our 5- and 6-year-olds, not our youngest learners, but close to, and how to see that develop through a developmental lens, how best to engage them. We also provide grade level guidance on how to build a schedule, both a daily schedule, weekly, and year at a glance, so that the pacing is appropriate, so that all grade level standards are addressed across the year. We then provide guidance on our deeper learning priorities and what they look like at a kindergarten level. So for example, with collaboration, what can we expect kindergarteners to do? How might they be different than first graders, second graders, et cetera? It includes all of the instructional materials for the grade level. So all units of instruction and materials for all content areas. And then finally, we also provide assessment guidance. So where to collect information on student progress, how to look at it and analyze it to figure out what to do next with students. And all of that is sort of wrapped up in what's meant to be a one-stop shop. So the hope is to really finalize that kindergarten structure so that we can learn from our feedback and then replicate and build it out for additional grades.
Thank you. I just want to respond to a question in the chat. I see that Megan asked about why we're not doing the why we're not piloting EL education in the elementary schools as well as the middle schools. So the answer to that is we don't know exactly what we're piloting yet. We are reviewing materials in coordination with Tntp. They've made some recommendations to us. And we have yet to determine how many pilots we can run. So yes, we are considering other materials and we want to pilot actually more than one. So right now we're trying to figure out what that may be, and that may well include EL education in the elementary. We've had some familiarity with that on our team. I have worked with that, as has Devin. So Tntp is helping us work through what would be the best pilot options. I would personally like to pilot at least 2 options in our elementary school, maybe 3 if we have a third one that we feel like we're really strong. We don't want to manage too many. Like I said, these are over long term when we want to collect data. I want to say that really clearly. We want time to have focus groups to be able to collect data and to make some really informed decisions, especially if we're moving to a long-term adoption. And I think most folks know we adopt about every 10 to 15 years. And so whatever we decide on is really a long-term investment for our students, and we really want to make a really well-informed choice. So it may well be that it's EL education along with some other options. So we want to make sure that that we have that in place. So hopefully, Megan, that answers your question around that. I'm not
Dr. Priestley, kind of related to that question. So you mentioned like adoption, piloting to adopt. Can you share more about, is the direction moving towards adopting like 1 or 2, or what that's going to look like for elementary and beyond?
Elementary, if we adopt, it would be 1 curricular that we would choose. So that's why we want to try a couple. So we want to make sure that we are that may mean taking a little bit more time, but there's some really EL education, I think, is an example. They're newer on the market. I think folks have who've been in this space before, maybe many years ago. There are several new curricula on the market now that are out, that are come from teachers. A lot of them are teacher-based, that we want to explore, that really lean into the expertise that teachers have, made by teachers, developed by teachers, piloted by teachers, that kind of thing, has a lot of investment. And so we want to really take a wide look and see what meets our needs. So it's going to be a process. All that to say, it's going to be a process, and we want to try to be as thorough as we can in the process.
All right, thank you for that update. Yeah, we have a few questions for you, and then there's more coming through chat, but want to just start back, take a step back and say thank you guys for sharing what's happening with the different pilots and the plans for elementary and middle school to get to kind of a core curriculum structure. We are almost at the end of this school year, our first year back in person, and we'd be curious, like, what are we seeing for the data of like how kids are versus what we were anticipating them coming back to be, and how have they been growing this year, and what's been going on there with our students?
Right. So I want to say this, we are, will not be to the end of the year to know exactly how much our students have grown over the course of the year when we review the data. So that's going to be in a collection process, and our RPA team will give us more information about that. One of the things, recognizing those gaps, what we can say is we have tried to provide as many resources as possible. And late this spring, we were able to engage tutors for students. We've talked about that in Book Nook that we have been working with, as well as Springboard. We are going to continue with Springboard over the summer. So if your child is wanting to take advantage of that, we will have Springboard in the early grades. We continue to provide our digital platforms. That's a decision that we have made to continue to invest in, so students can have learning over the summer as well into the fall. We want them to have as much continuation as possible. So if they've been accessing Raz Kids or books, Raz Kids or Mayan, Dreambox for math, if you're in a Title I school, we've paid for that centrally, they can access those things. So what we continue to do to ensure as much growth opportunity as possible to make resources available from the Curriculum and Instruction Office. I also want to just put a plug on summer school. This is what may well be our last year for expanded summer school. We have had funding from the state that we had were able to provide a wide array of activities for students, whether it was in an after school Excel program, any type of thing that for some of our high school, it was doing enrollment, internships. We had more internships last summer than we had ever had. We expect to continue all of those things. You will see coming home at the end of the school year. We have ordered backpacks once again for all children. They will have their readers in them. They will have, I think, about 10 readers. in there for the summer. They will also have an ELA workbook, a math workbook, materials, things like that to help them with their summer work. So we were continuing to provide resources, and we will be looking at the data and seeing what inroads have been made and how we can further support that in the classrooms. I do see lots of things in the chat I want to respond to. I don't know any way to get to all of them, but I want to just talk about what are the factors that we're looking for in the curriculum. We will be building a criteria, and also we're doing that in tandem with Tntp. We will share that when that has been complete. What we don't want to do is make assumptions about what was needed, but certainly based on research, best practice, and some of the findings from the audit will help us create a criteria that we can compare against as we work through which materials that we will be selecting for a pilot. Also, I want to say that Tntp has really led us, and we've always done this, but we'll continue to do it in collaboration with Tntp, is leaning into the ed reports. And many of you are familiar with that. That is a bank that gives an overview of different curricula and areas where they're strong and areas where they may need some improvement. So we will be using that as a resource to construct our criteria for that. So, and again, I saw some just reference there to Oakland that yes, we expect that we will have a multi-year focus on literacy and begin to build out. Again, I think you can see we're upgrading our curriculum, looking at our assessment, looking at our interventions. We know we're focused heavily right now on tier 1, but in the same process, I think we could not help but look at tier 2 as well. And that's really the interventions that students might be getting, because we want students to continue to learn and not necessarily have 2 divergent paths. We want them to build on one another. So
yes.
We
That's
want
really
to
helpful, Dr. Priestley. I think to add on to that, you did mention assessments. We would love to hear more what's happening on the assessment side. So I think you had mentioned like balanced assessment system. Talk more about what that's going to look like and how that will align to the potential curriculum that you guys are thinking about adopting and piloting.
So I'm going to say a couple of things about assessment. One, I'm just going to speak to I want to speak to screeners, because that's come up. And so that's not your space, Stacy. I'm just responding to what I have heard. So in some forums and as I've been engaging with communities. So I'm along with Jean, I'm saying along with one of my colleagues, Jean Robertson, we are working very closely with the Dyslexia Center. And so we have approved a pilot in our district, a very small pilot, to pilot a dyslexia screener. So we're looking at definitely 1 school, 2 schools. We're actually meeting with schools in the next couple of weeks to see if they're the right fit for these particular pilots. And we will have them begin working in schools next year, which will come with community engagement, professional development for teachers, assessing of students who are showing markers for dyslexia, and using this particular screener as a pilot. So as we get feedback and information and data, again, we're going to be looking at that. We hope it to be a multi-year relationship. We would like to expand as we find success, if that is indeed the case. We also want to be able to target some underserved communities specifically, where those types of resources might not be available to families outside of the school system. So we want to even expand whatever school we may be in to somehow be able to touch some additional families. So we're looking at that. And so let me put a pin in that. That's like huge. That's one of our big things that we want
Dr.
to
Priestley,
see.
quick follow-up. That is really huge. I think. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. No, I can talk about,
to that.
some other assessments. We're going to talk about some other assessments, but that was
yeah. Before we leave the dyslexia one, I had a question come in about what is the name of the screening and when's the pilot going to be taking place?
I cannot tell you the actual name of theirs. It's a really long, complicated name, and then it has an acronym that I am not as familiar with. So I will get back to you on what the name of it is, but it is coming out of the UCSF Dyslexia Center. So this is one that they have been working to develop over years in tandem with other researchers across the country. And I can certainly get the name of it and share it. And it's going to start in the fall. We have not selected the school yet. We're doing that right now in the process. So I think by the next 2 or 3 weeks, we should have the school, named. And really what we want to look at, we were talking specifically the early grades in terms of where we would like to start, but even in 1 year, there's like where we might be able to, depending on the school and the size and the school we select, we might be able to do it for all the grades, and for students who might be identified with that. But I will get back to you with the name as I can easily share that. And I'm gonna say this, at a future time, I think they would love to come and share, and maybe perhaps even in this space. I don't want to offer them up, but they have been very willing to be partners with us, and they've also presented at the curriculum committee last year. So I think they're willing to come visit, and if it's something that would be of interest to the group, we certainly could work with that out.
Yeah, that could be amazing. Dr. Priestley, you're going to talk about other assessments. So what else is happening on the assessment side?
Gosh. So we are also looking at a universal screener pilot. So and I believe it is called STAR. Devin, correct me if I'm wrong. And I know Lisa Levin might be in this crowd somewhere. So if we see Lisa and she was able to give a mic, she would be able to speak more to it. But we have a universal screener that we're also piloting next year called STAR. So that's something that we're going to run alongside the dyslexia screener, not same school, but beginning to think about how can we be more targeted in terms of getting to students early in their literacy needs, and how we can just be ahead of the curve. We know the early intervention and early identification in any way affords students greater opportunities. So we want to begin that. Also, and I want to say this, we will be looking at, as part of our curriculum, we will also have to rethink our assessments, right? I don't think there's any way to look at new curriculum without rethinking our assessments. So one of the things that with assessments, we will have to work really closely in partnership with our assessment team and RPA. They are in some ways the holder of kind of assessments. Curriculum and instruction really works very closely with RPA in that space. And as we make decisions about our tier 1 instruction or our tier 2 interventions, we will also have to take a look at where where it lines up, because what we don't want is to present new curriculum and then have assessments that aren't really looking at what the students are learning, right? So if that makes sense, we know we need to do some more alignment there. And so that will be part of the process.
Yeah, and that's such a good point, Dr. Priestley. So related to that, I know that there's a lot of families that are concerned about FNP. Would it be potentially moving away from FNP, or just seeing what's going to make sense for the new curriculum?
We're going to see what makes sense. I'm not going to say what it is. Yes. But that is something, I think we have to put all things on the table, right? In terms of what makes the most sense.
And then for the STAR early literacy assessment, is that tier 1, tier 2? Is it both?
Well, first of all, let me say yes to multitudes. So Rebecca, I just think that is exactly what it's called. It is a longer than name that, but they call it multitudes. So that is correct. And is STAR part of the tier 1 or tier 2? I thought it was, I'm going to look at Devin. Is it tier 2 or tier 1? I thought it was.
I was going to ask if we if we wanted to elevate Lisa to a panelist so that she can answer more of the specific questions.
Yeah, Lisa is the lead on that particular from our curriculum instruction. So if she's here and can be elevated, she'd have information on that.
Welcome, Lisa.
Hello, good afternoon.
Lisa, introduce yourself. Some people may not know you.
Hi, I'm Lisa Levin. I am the supervisor for elementary English language arts.
And Lisa, can you tell us a little about STAR, and is STAR tier 1 or tier 2?
So right now we're piloting STAR as a assessment for phonological processing and phonological phonics and foundational skills and phonological awareness, all those elements. And we're piloting it with our RTIFs, so those are our literacy intervention teachers. And we have a group of school sites, I believe it's 15, but I don't have the list right in front of me. And they are giving the STAR assessment to at least 10 students that are on the acceleration list for their school. And so we're piloting that. It right now it's within tier 2. But we are piloting that, and we're going to be collecting the feedback shortly.
Thank you, Lisa.
And Lisa, is it thinking that once we hear from the pilot how that's going, we would expand it to tier 1 and other levels?
So the way that we partner, any type of assessment decisions is a partnership with AAO and RPA. And we also have different union representation, like teacher union representation, both from different groups. Like there's a assessment group that we work with, and there are parents on that group, there are community people on that group, there are teachers in that group, and that group really helps to advise and inform and make decisions about the direction that we might go with our assessments. So it's a process. Any type of change is a process, and we want to make sure that everyone is informed and on board. So that decision hasn't yet been determined. I also know, and I just had a meeting with our AAO RPA assessment, and they also were talking about the need to wait for some guidance from the state. So that if there are shifts and recommendations from at this California state level regarding universal screeners, that we don't want to rush into anything without knowing what those recommendations would be from the state level.
Thank you. And then Dr. Priestley, you were mentioning earlier, I think there's a multitude of just curriculum shifts coming up and pilots coming up, assessments, new guidance, instructional guidance, as well as all these other interventions. Can you talk a little bit more about how all the other supplemental pieces tie into what's happening at the core instruction level, both in school and out of school?
So we want to continue with supplements because we know they're crucial, but we are trying to narrow them and curate them a little bit more. One of the things that happened during the pandemic, because we were in distance learning, we just created the buffet table of, in some ways of supplemental materials because we just wanted teachers to have a lot of access. We wanted parents to have a lot of access. So we are curating that a little more. Right now, we are hoping, and we have not finalized this, we are very much hoping to keep RAS Kids and Mayan because we know families are familiar with that. And we want to continue to keep high quality texts in the hands of kids. We are also expecting to keep Dreambox, and if your child attends a Title I school, they would have access to Dreambox. That is not for all schools, which is a math program. Devin, what else are we keeping in terms of the supplemental for digital platforms?
Mm-hmm. Did we speak to aspects of Nearpod?
Nearpod is usually teacher facing. We have many teachers who use Nearpod as an engagement tool as part of lesson development and presenting. And it's often you'll see perhaps more in our in our secondary space. It's available in the primary spaces also with elementary students, but that's typically used. It can be a complex tool with our older kids. We will also, I believe, keep Seesaw for our primary grades. So that's in terms of our digital platform. So some of the things that some other items may not be available. I know there's also families who've taken advantage of tutoring as a supplement. And we, as I stated, we know that we will have Springboard during the summer. We are yet to determine, and I do believe Lisa helped me with this, if Book Nook is also going through extending into the summer. So we will have students who will be taking advantage of Book Nook over the summer. We have yet to renegotiate contracts with Springboard or Book Nook for the fall. So we have through the summer, but we have not revisited contracts for the fall. So I don't want to speak too soon about whether those will be on the table, but we are hoping to continue with some kind of outside services that might be available to students in some way. We don't know in what form and what shape, and if it will be those two programs. I think based on the feedback, we'll make some decisions. We want to do a little community dipstick. We also want to look at students and look at progress and see if that was advantageous to our students. And our families tend to give us pretty good feedback around, because they see their children at home doing the work, around the level of engagement and the level of interest from the students, and how it plays along the work that they have from the school site. So that's an ongoing quest for us.
Hi, Dr. Priestley. This is Yvette. It's good to see you. Hi. Good to see you. So at the beginning, I did sort of go over a recap of November, and one of the things that you mentioned that you really spent some time with, are obviously the assessments and the plan for the 3 shifts. I'm curious if there's any actual data that you can share from any sort of programs related to outcomes, if you've seen anything since that time. We talked a little bit about the spring 2021 data that had our students, in particular those Black and Brown students, at a very low rate. And then also, a side note before we sort of start wrapping up, an interesting question came in that's so related, and I wasn't sure if you were able to see it, but whether or not there had been any thinking surrounding the writing component of literacy. I think most of us in the room know how important that is. And we've spent a lot of time talking about reading, but if anything you can share related to that and any particular data and improvements that have happened since we met.
So I'm going to hold on the data piece. We're doing data collection. This is the time of year when we would be collecting data coming up on the end of the year. As many of you know, your children will be experiencing SBAC and different assessments. And we do look at students and gains and how they do, if they've participated in, say, Book Nook, if they've participated in Springboard. So we work with our RPA team, our research planning and assessment team, to look at when students have had participation in various offerings, how has that impacted their performance on assessments. So that's information I'm glad to share. So Yvette, please make a note for me to bring that back, and so we can look at that. We also collect data as part of summer. I do want to encourage summer. Last year's data showed that there were some gains for students who participated in a summer program. So RPA gave that data back to us from last summer. So we're going to follow that again as well. But it seems that those students often, maintain what they've learned and also move ahead in some ways. So we want to make sure that we continue with that. I expect that we would see some gains as well with the tutoring. And I believe in the first year that we piloted with Book Nook, we saw some positive gains with them. And that's one of the reasons we expanded that programming opportunity. So I'm expecting to see that as a positive, but I'm glad to share that hard data when we have it. And we do collect that. So, and I think we would have that probably in the next time that we would be able to present. So let's just spend a minute talking about writing. So you don't know, some writing is one of my favorite things. It is key. And I think one of the things that we want to incorporate and have be front and center in whatever curriculum that we move towards would be a strong writing component. And so, and have that really be part of the instructional reading writing block. One of the things we're also trying to carve out in the guides that we are creating is to put, shine a really bright light, not only on instruction time around reading, but writing, and making sure that students see themselves as authors, that they are engaging in writing processes, that they are publishing their work, that they are using their rubrics, they're receiving feedback. And we know that writing helps students, and what we really want to focus on is creating the writing to their reading and helping them being critical thinkers around that. And so we have a lot of that, but as we move into thinking about new curriculum, we know that's a really central focus for us. And so we've gotten a lot of feedback around that. I've heard that many times, you know, that's not the first inquiry I have about, oh, writing. And that's one of the ways that we know students demonstrate learning, right? We can see their progress through their writing. So what is that in terms of, you know, where is that going to play? But it is a focus. We just looked at schedules and did some work around that. And Devin can tell you, we spent a lot of time talking, she's smiling because we spent a lot of time talking about writing. Like I just didn't make that up. We just did that yesterday, I think 2 days ago. So it's really key. I just want you to know it's front and center. As a person who has a reading specialist background, I'm very committed to that. And I think in anything that we pilot and we're going to bring forth, that will be a strong component, no doubt. I see, and I know we only have like 3 or 4 minutes. What I am very happy to do is come back, and I don't want to, we probably can get one more question in, but if I just want someone to say, if they have a question, go ahead and put it in, and I will try to, and if you get them to me, Yvette, or put them in some, I will try to send back a written response, but I'll also try to incorporate them for the next time we come back.
No, that would be great. I know we're going to wrap up soon. And I guess just
Cut anybody off.
At least surrounding this information you just shared about the writing, as a foundational skill, we know how important that is. And I know you talked about the piloting programs for middle school, but are there some specific related to the foundational skills, sentence structure, grammar, vocabulary, spelling, that also will be implemented when you talk about these pilot programs in addition to the reading?
Mm-hmm. So let me say this, we probably are going to start first in the primary grades. Like, I think we want to start K1, 2 is probably where we're going to really hyper focus initially and work our way up maybe in the 3-5. I don't know what we're going to be able to put together. Like, we're going to, once we really sit down and see, but in my mind right now, knowing what I know, I feel like we should tackle the K-2 space first. Like, I really want to have the very things that you just mentioned, sentence structure, grammar, vocabulary. I'm looking at Harvard's comments, like all of those things. That's where we want to start. Like, that's our foundational, and see where we can build. There's lots of things that we have to consider. Do we want to, and this is like, these are the hard questions we have to ask, and we don't know. Are we going to be able to find a curriculum that focuses on the foundational skills as well as the reading for older kids? Are we going to find something that, yes, works really well in K and 2, but might not be great in that space, but might not be great for 3, 4, and 5? And do we want to bifurcate and create 2 different pathways there in terms of curriculum? So we're going to have to make some hard decisions, right, at some point. Now, ideally, this is what we all wish for, that we find the one magic bullet thing that does it all really well to the level that we want it to happen, right? So that's what would be ideal, I think, in everyone's brain. But I'm also prepared in my mind to think outside of that and go with what gives us will serve as the strongest resource in that area. And so we have to kind of be open to different ideas around that. But I would say for me right now, in talking to Tntp, and I think for my team, when I say me, I'm speaking for my team as well, we know that we believe that our best starting point would be in the early grades and to work our way up. And with that, we are going to have a strong focus on the foundational skills, on phonics, you know, on those early literacy skills, especially in kindergarten, coming in, that we want to make sure that students have that will allow them to become great readers, right? So we're there. We're in a good space around it. I think we've gotten all the kind of makings. I think one of the things I really want to appreciate people who've supported the audit, because what this audit has done is really given us great information around what now and helping us make some really good informed decisions about how we can launch some strong pilots that will hopefully yield some great things for us going forward.
All right, well, we're coming up on 12:59. Stacy, did you have any final comments before we close out?
Just thank you all for the rapid response Q&A today. We just really appreciated that and looking forward for a follow-on conversation.
Yes, I want to echo that. Obviously, thank you, Dr. Priestley. We really appreciate this informative presentation. It's a wonderful talk too. Obviously, we are looking forward to much more communication coming out, in particular surrounding the audit. As was just dropped in the chat, we hope that many of you will be able to attend that Public Board of Education meeting. As Dr. Priestley mentioned, it will be in person on May 9th, related to the literacy audit, the results, the recommendations that are going to be shared there. It sounds like there will also be an opportunity to review any information via the board docs prior to the meeting. So please be on the lookout for that. From us here at SF Parents, please, if you can attend, feel free to join us on May 18th. We have a monthly parent meeting that will be happening. We'll debrief this, other topics, along with things that are shaping our community in the SFUSD Ed space. I also want to thank, obviously, SF Ed, Stacy, and the team for putting this all together with us. And yes, I believe that's it. Wonderful. All right. Well, we look forward to seeing all of this information publicly shared after you collect all the data. And thank you all again for coming. Be well and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.